Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host, Tyler Schatz, seated front and center at the Purple Wedding. Joining me this fine evening are one Nick Castillo.
Long live the king.
And Gary Delaney.
Much like the hero of the revolution, I need a clean shave.
Unfortunately, we will be minus the Howards tonight. They are off on assignment, so we will wish them well and hope they return to us as soon as they can. So I hear it's a long road back from the capital when you have to go to a wedding.
Many leagues.
All right, we have watched season 4, episode 1 and episode 2 for this podcast here. So starting off with episode 1, Two Swords. Tyrion welcomes a guest to King's Landing. At Castle Black, Jon stands trial. Daenerys is pointed to Meereen, the mother of all slave cities, and Arya runs into an old enemy. So I want to just kind of start off with just the cold open, the first one we've had in quite a while, of the melting of ice. And basically kind of the symbolic end of kind of like the Stark family as we kind of know it. We, as the viewer, know there are other Starks still alive. I mean, there's obviously, obviously Sansa's in the capital. She's technically married to Tyrion, so she's technically a Lannister. But we, as the viewer, know Arya is alive. And, I mean, Jon is technically a raised Stark family member there, too. And we know he is alive at the Wall now.
And Brandon Rickon.
Yes, thank you. Brandon Rickon are still alive, too. But it's kind of definitely to me, it's just like Tywin in his final glory there, basically, of like, I have won. I have defeated all of my enemies. And now I am melting their gigantic family sword down to forge two of my own, which we find out later on he's wanted forever, Valyrian swords for the Lannister family there, and he finally gets it basically there with the two swords that he makes there. So I'm just kind of wondering here, Gary, it looks like you've got something kind of further to add here. Like, what did you guys kind of think of that? Like, did you kind of take that all in as Tyrion or Tywin was like, "Yep, I am the victor"?
It in as like up and to the point of which Robb is gone, and at this point, the only remaining in their mind, the only remaining Starks are Cersei and Jon Snow.
No, Sansa.
Sansa and Jon Snow. And Jon Snow has no claim to the North, and Sansa is a Lannister. So I was curious in watching that if maybe he waited until this point, because if he had to make reparations for murdering your father, stealing your family's heirloom, that he might have had to give back ice as part of reparations at some point. You know, if you have to sue for peace, like giving back your father's sword, which is a great, like, no matter who's, like, it is a really cool fucking thing.
It's a family heirloom, yeah.
Yeah, that is something you'd have to keep around as a bargaining chip. I mean, he's already given back Ned's body. I don't know if it ever got back there, but it was given to Catelyn.
Mm-hmm.
So
I was going to comment, I mean, Ed Stark died in season 1, and now we're talking about season 4. So it has been some time since that room occupied, you know. We've seen 2 Hand of the Kings go through there. First Tyrion in Tywin's stead, and now since Tywin's been back, he's had the room as well. So I'm sure that, you know, a 7-foot, 6-foot, you know, bastard sword or something that's not easily overlooked. I'm sure that they've held this sword for a while then, since Ned passed. Interesting to think about giving reparations or maybe having to give it back. I think if anything was just sort of that moment where Tywin was waiting to finally say, yeah, this is ours, or I'm getting rid of this thing because it is ridiculously huge. The only time we've seen in this series Ned use it is in the first episode where he executes, you know, and condemns the man who left the wall and failed his oath.
Interestingly, Like, he went to King's Landing with ice, which, if you think of it as a family heirloom, you would think you'd leave ice in Winterfell with Robb, because Robb is the Lord of No,
He'd be Lord of Winterfell in his stead.
The Lady of Winterfell, and Robb is still a Lord of Winterfell, but Catelyn is still technically the Lord of Winterfell in Ned's stead, I would assume. Robb does not become the Lord of Winterfell. Tyler?
Go ahead, Nick. I think you have more of like a clarifying point for that.
I was just thinking the timeline. Point of clarification first. When Sir Ilan Payne kills Ned, does he do it with ice?
Yes.
To use his own sword. Okay, I was just going to say, can we confirm that Ned actually did bring ice, or maybe it was just in Winterfell until the hero of the Revolution burned Winterfell down? Not the hero of the Revolution. Theon burned Winterfell down. So I was going to say maybe that's not it, and like it's since now been sent down. But yeah, if Sir Ilan Payne used it, then yeah, they've had it around for a while. So yeah, why he would have brought it down? That's a good point, Gary. I don't know.
So that's my question there too. Of like, why on earth did Ned Stark bring this gigantic sword down from Winterfell to King's Landing? Because we've seen, like in the first episode, it's a very large sword. It's I would say it's not even a bastard sword. It's a two-hander at best there. So like, what was the purpose of even bringing that to King's Landing there? Because when he got into the fight with Jaime outside the brothel there, he was using a regular sword, I guess. I don't know what you would call that.
It's not a sword that he would fight with. Yeah, it's strictly it's
strictly ceremonial, or in that case of the beheading there. So I'm like,
it was for why he brought it. King's justice.
Instituting what? Instituting the King's justice?
It was for instituting the King's justice. It was for whatever the word is. It was for specifically, I think, 4 executions.
But like, why would the hand of the king need that sword, though?
Yeah, because you have Ilan Payne in King's Landing. Like, the king has his own headsman.
Yeah.
Tyler, was that all you had?
That's it.
My bonus question that on a rewatch I didn't realize: whose sword is bigger? Because as you look at the mold, one sword is maybe 2/3 the size of the other, so there is a larger. So did he give the biggest sword to his son or his king? Because honestly, you guys are shaking your heads like they're the same size sword.
No, they are different swords. Tyler, you can jump in as well if you'd like here, but I think that he gave the larger one to Jaime.
That's what I thought. I was assuming too.
As whatever he's going to name it as, because yes, Jaime hasn't named it yet, but Jaime has his Valyrian steel sword. But spoilers. But
all good swords have a name.
All good swords have a name, exactly. Especially strongly made Valyrian steel ones. Tywin said too, like he had to specially bring someone in from Volantis, like across the Narrow Sea, who knew how to work the Valyrian steel. But the other one that was smaller, I would think that he would have given to Joffrey. At that point, I don't think Joffrey knew that there were 2 swords made from it. Just that
he
knew that there was another bigger sword.
2 swords. There's 2 Valyrian steel swords in King's Landing. So I was trying to like measure it up. I think it would have been
smaller and easier for Joffrey to move around than his son Jaime, who's a full-grown man.
I was trying to measure it up as they both held it out, and I couldn't.
I think Jaime is the one who ultimately got the longer one. I mean, I think too it maybe even stems from Tywin's
family.
Like ultimately, the Lannister, the Lannister line.
Proximity of his family.
Yeah, the Lannister line technically gets the bigger sword because, like Jaime has told Tywin, like a little later in the episode, they've always wanted a Valyrian steel sword. So obviously, House Lannister would get the larger one of the 2 than House Baratheon.
Obviously.
Was it really maybe just the question of how small of a sword you could give Joffrey and still get the biggest fucking sword possible for the Lannisters? Because I feel like as he's a traveled in war, he probably would want a very intimidating sword for the Lannisters. hoping that his grandsons that are not Cersei's children, that are Jaime's children, would someday wield this beautiful sword that is probably, a secondary as intimidating as ice, but not gregoriously fucking huge.
Exactly. All right.
Anyway, that was my note. Nick, you're up. What was your question on the swords?
We talked about most of them. I didn't really have much on the swords, other than I agree, like Tyler's original point, it was very symbolic, where there's not really any talking. It's just the undercut tone, where I think it's, the Reigns of Castamere, as he's burning down the sword, saying, yeah, this is an end to ice, a song of ice and fire. This is now, in the flames, we're reforging these two swords into something new. The Starks of the old age, since we're referencing Ned, and what was is no longer. We're doing something new.
I was going to say here too, I think, so I've listened to the music of Game of Thrones a lot here recently, and I think the theme of the House Lannister is the Reigns of Castamere, like, instrumental part, like, not necessarily the words and stuff, but every time, like, the Lannister theme comes up, you can equate it to the Reigns of Castamere there. So I think they're kind of interchangeable when we're talking about the house themes there. Gary?
I was going to say, and the last scene of him, like, not only do you melt, the first part of the scene is him knocking the handle off of ice and then melting it. And then the very last scene is he takes the wolf skin
That it was in.
that obviously, as it's a ceremonial sword, it doesn't need a belt hilt sheath. It has a very, like, probably elaborate, very, very thick wolf skin, like, sheath that it sits in to sort of, increase intimidation. And he just, like, throws that whole, like, because to him, a wolf skin sheath, like, there's no use to that. Like, even as a ceremonial thing, like, he has no value in, like, this gaudy, like, wolf skin trinket that was valuable to the Starks. Like, if he was going to make a similar sheath, it would probably be a giant lion skin, like, gold embroidered crazy thing. Nick?
Mm-hmm. Very gilded. I'm sure, thinking back in that original episode where we see ice first unsheathed, I think, like, Robb is carrying ice, and Ned, pulls it out when he's going to actually use it, and does the held in the ground. You've been found guilty in the laws of gods and men, and so it's this whole traditional stance about how the sword, what it represents too for the Starks. Yeah, none of that is needed now, for multiple reasons. Connotations, and so it's something that's superfluous, and in Tywin's mind, if it's not needed or not generating money, we don't need it.
I think you said earlier that Ned is only seen with ice once, and on actually relevant to this episode, there's a second time you see Ned with ice, and that's when he's sharpening it by the Godswood, and Catelyn comes out to greet him by the Godswood as he's, like, reflecting while sharpening ice. I think it's probably in the first episode. Like, oh, realize the king is coming, and it's like, well, I guess I gotta finish sharpening my sword. Like,
right. That point exactly, right? It's like the king is coming. He's not, going to catch up with his buddy. He's not going to do this. He's standing on traditionalism because that's what he is known for. He's going to sharpen his sword so that he can, present it or use it as a representation of his house or something of that nature. Very traditional.
I feel like you wouldn't
Starks.
be wielding ice in the presence of the Lannisters.
Just like what we were talking about, the fact that it's in his special sheath, wolf's head, whatever. It's something that's representing their family. So that was it.
That's all we got on that one, I think.
Yeah, we talked for quite a lot for just a small segment out there.
5 seconds. That's it.
I was going to move on here too to, like, the opening. For the first time, we see the Dreadfort, the house of the. Wow, why am I drawing a blank on their name?
The Flayed Man.
Bolton, the Flayed Man symbol. Winterfell is still in ruins, and then also the Free City of Marine is in the credits there too, which we haven't seen fully yet there. But that is Dany's
all the way across the narrow sea.
Yep.
Slaver's Bay. Yep.
So the first part I wanted to just my first point to just talk about for this episode. Well, I guess it's technically my second part here to talk about here is basically it's just the scene where Jamie is being presented his new sword by his father there, and basically his father is giving him the orders of you will return home to be the Lord of Casterly Rock there. Because Tywin is not planning on going back home anytime soon, being the hand of the king. He believes he's just going to die now in King's Landing and eventually be taken back home when he's dead. So I like the scene from Jamie because it's like one of the few times where you see the Lannister children stand up to Tywin there from his imposing figure and orders there and stuff. And Jamie's kind of taking the stance on he doesn't want to forsake the vows he took to be the Kingsguard there. He he says something like, my honor's shit already, what do I care? Or something like that. But you can kind of clearly see the change kind of has, it feels like the change has kind of started for Jamie where he's no longer kind of this arrogant, brash person. He feels like he's trying to do something better, restore somewhat of his honor after spending some time with Brienne, probably one of the most honorable person he's been around in quite some time there. Gary?
I was gonna say, you mentioned that does not plan on seeing the Rock again, and I think that's just proof that, like, he assumes that in the next couple of years, as Joffrey like gets the wheels rolling on being the king and being married, that his place is at court, because in order to, he still needs to do more work to secure the line of Lannisters and to play the puppet games that he feels he needs to play.
I'm going to be devil's advocate a little bit to your point, Tyler. I think that it's not so much he's setting out to restore his honor. I think that's a byproduct of his actions. I think that he more so realizes that he's mortal. Like, that so much of what we see in early scenes with Jamie is that he is a Lannister. He is the proud young sir, the knighted, heir to Castle Rock. He can do no wrong. He's got all the money in the world. He's got, the love and devotion of a woman he cares about. I think that he kind of sees himself as he can't be touched. And so in losing his hand, he realizes, yeah, I am going to get my butt kicked some days. Or I like he says, I'm just going to lay over and die when he loses his hand in the previous episodes. And so now when he's talking to the king, or to Tywin, his father, he is a bit more glib, or he is a bit more, quick to the punch and sarcastic about who he is and what, my honor is shit, or whatever that you commented on. I think that he's just realizes that, I want to do what I should do, or I want to be the person that I need to be. I don't think, like, if you said, like, are you trying to be honorable? I don't know if he'd really say he was doing that. He may want to do that, but I don't think that's something he's going to own up to right now at this point.
I'm gonna say, like, ironically, Jamie's like, honor of being in the Kingsguard. If I remember correctly, like, bad history lesson, the Mad King institutes Jamie as a Kingsguard partially as kind of a fuck you to his father, because that's how he thinks he can keep control of the Lannisters, is by taking the best, like, firstborn son, the best heir to Casterly Rock, and taking him out of the equation of, like, being the the heir apparent, possibly so that at a later date he can, give him back to his father as a knight, as a former King's Guard, but ultimately that's in the Mad King's hands to, ensure that he keeps control over the Lannisters. Nick?
Very much, yeah. I think that he's a hostage of a couple different sorts when that happens. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Kingsguard are supposed to forswear off having marriages and children too. So I think that, it's a way of ultimately saying Tywin can't have any offspring past Jamie. And he wouldn't necessarily be quick to welcome to the family any offspring from Tyrion either. So yeah, I think in a way it's a huge, middle finger to what Tywin wants.
Yeah, I'll completely kind of agree with that. There was a point you had mentioned there too, Nick, about how Jamie is not ready yet to say he's doing it for his honor. Not clearly, I would definitely agree with that. He's not at that point yet where he's trying, he's openly going to admit he's trying to redeem himself there too. And he's even in talking with Cersei in a later scene of this episode there, he's trying to make it about, oh, he's staying because she's still there and everything like that. That is maybe more of the way he can kind of present it there. I mean, obviously to just Cersei there because of what's going on between them two, but I think there's maybe just a little bit of Jamie that's trying to talk himself into the fact that he's trying to slowly redeem himself.
I was gonna say, like, another thing that I learned in this scene is that Jamie is 40. Twice in this episode, both Tywin and Joffrey both point out that he's a 40-year-old, and his life, he's very mortal. He's at the tipping point to where he needs to do something with his life. So I literally noted that because I was like, I don't know if it had ever been fully explained that what Jamie's age was. Would that also mean that Cersei's 40 because they're twins? Anyway, Tyler?
Yeah, that's a great point there too, because then it touches on that scene with Joffrey and him in the Kingsguard tower there, basically, where they've got the big book of all of the previous Kingsguard and all of their great deeds, and Joffrey makes that side comment to Jamie of like, where's all of your great deeds written down in this book and stuff? And Jamie kind of, I think that's another thing to your point there of like, it kind of hits Jamie and it's like, okay, yeah, I maybe need to get doing something too. And also too, I just wanted to point out a small Easter egg there too. They mentioned Sir Duncan the Tall, which is from the book series of Duncan Egg. They're basically, I think it's called like a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms or something like that. It's a separate book series that's kind of been tied into the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Gary?
Also, Sir Duncan is referenced, I believe, in Nan in King's Landing about all the stories she was going to tell.
The Starks in Winterfell?
What the little crippled Bran, when he was in bed, I was like, oh, do you want to hear the story about Sir Duncan the Tall? Are you laughing? It was Bran. Bran?
Bran.
Oh, you had the right name. It was the adjective little cripple that got me.
Bran the Broken.
I was just referencing too. Yeah, excellent catch, Gary, to pick out the specifics of his age too, because it's so much more connotation than just he's 40, which is a little older in that time period. We were talking before this recording about high fantasy. 40 is near dead. Like, you don't live long, right? And so that also says not just that he hasn't done much with his life or much that's been recorded up in this point, but also, points out that he may not have much time left either. It's not like 40 is going to live till 80.
So here's a question. You pointed out that Joffrey points out like, oh, well, so Jamie, here's your page. What great things have you done? Do you think he was saying that sarcastically, or do you think he perhaps like was asking the question not sarcastically, like, oh, let's see all the things you've done? But he already knew the answer, that you haven't done shit with your life, and the one thing you have done is you killed the Mad King. But you or your father will not allow anyone to write about that. So anyway, Tyler?
Total sarcasm. They're total backhanded, side-handed, whatever compliment there.
I agree. It was interesting, like, thinking of that scene again. I think intentionally he's going to snark about what he's had written about him. Like, oh, it's nothing really great other than, like you said, Gary, it's just the Kingslaying. But he flips the page. He looks to say, Sir Jaime Lannister. He flips the page, and then he kind of pauses and he goes, Uncle, it looks like they've left out some of your exploits. I think at first it was like he was going to make fun of what he's done, but then he sees the added benefit to being a jackass, that there's nothing written at all about him. I mean, there's like a paragraph or something short, and then that's it. So yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think he meant it sarcastically, but he meant it even more so when he followed it up after he realized that Jaime didn't have much written about him, or just that none's been recorded.
Okay, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything. What do we know about the relationship between Joffrey and Jaime?
As far as
Nick.
like how they view one another, or
How are they related?
I think what Gary's asking is how they're related. I think that Jaime, at one point in season 1 or season 2, right around the time when he's trying to go after Baratheon's bastards, he makes a reference to his mother and says, "I've heard some of the horrible stories that they've said about you." And he looks at me and he goes, "Is it true?" And like, I think just about his mother and his uncle. I don't think that he's put 2 and 2 together enough to wonder about his own origin.
I think
He has. I think he's shut it out completely.
I'm the king.
Because
Anyway.
he said several times, "I'm the king. I'm the rightful king." Either trying to prove he is, any man who says that he is the king is not the king, to quote Tywin. But I think that he's aware that there's a chance. I'll say that much. At the very least, I think he's aware there's a chance that he knows.
he's aware.
Anyway,
of the
I asked that question sort of from Jaime's point of view, because in the same episode, he gets belittled by his own father, like, about how he's a disappointment, and then a couple scenes later, he gets belittled by his own biological son about how he's a disappointment. Like, and so he's really just disappointing everyone. Tyler?
And then too, he gets basically belittled by Cersei for not being there when he was captured.
Well, snap.
Yeah. So obviously they're trying to show that he is definitely cornered, and like his dad, his lover, his son, like all just treat him like shit, and he thought he was gonna come back and like kind of get a hero's welcome of like, I returned, and I returned alive, like welcome me, and they're like, you're a disappointment. Why couldn't you keep your hand, and why'd you get captured?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is true. He has that scene with Cersei, I believe, where he does kind of open up to her, and he's like, "I fought every day to get back to you," and she's like, "You took too long. Things are different now." It's like, what? I had nothing to do with this. It's not like I intended to, and so yeah, it absolutely puts him in a position where he feels cornered. What's his value? His father doesn't want him there. His father wants him at Castle Rock. I think that Jaime is smart enough to know that he probably knows Joffrey is his. I don't think it's ever expressed or it's said, but I'm sure he knows. And so, yeah, just that too. It's nothing that he's going to outright say to Joffrey or say in the presence of anyone else, for sure. But it's something that, yeah, he kind of feels like he's getting it all on all angles, and he's just existing for those few early parts of this episode.
I think maybe Jaime's too even feeling like he doesn't really have any agency in his own life, any control over his own life. He's being directed by his father to do this. He's being directed by his sister to be a disappointment, and that he needs to be there for her always. And also too, I kind of, speaking of that scene there too, I wrote down too, we're kind of starting to see the Cersei kind of her clean image kind of fraying a little bit there around the edges, because Jaime notes she's starting to drink more. She's starting to basically lash out at everyone that should be in like her close inner circle there. I mean, Jaime obviously being the big one in that circle there. She's lashing out at Jaime there. Nick.
Yeah, very, very true. Good observation on Cersei's part too. You said the agency for Jaime, and I guess a question I just posed to the two of you is, where do we think Jaime was drawing his identity from? And what do we see it change to now? Speculation is fine.
I think that he saw himself as a master swordsman and a gold cloak and a very beautiful man. Like prestige. Like, even though he's a king's guard, like, he's still the most clean-shaven and well-kept member of the king's guard compared to the Hound, Cerulean Payne, and whatever that other brick
Meryn
is in
Trant.
this episode. What?
Meryn Trant, I believe.
Meryn Trant.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it just the way he's kept, he keeps himself still as if he's a lord. He still presents himself as a lord.
Yeah, I
And
would,
now he's just sort of a joke, like, and talking about being a disappointment. Like, at the very least, even if Joffrey didn't like Jaime before, he at least understood that he was a reputable swordsman and
Sure.
someone who needed to be respected. Because I think Jaime also always saw himself as the second best swordsman in the Kingsguard, only to Sir Baron?
Barristan Selmy.
Barristan
Tell
Selmy.
me.
And now, with Barristan being kicked out, he thought he'd come back and still he'd be the best swordsman, and now he's the worst swordsman. So I think that being a good swordsman is really all he had as a Kingsguard, because he didn't have any of that lordly title. Nick?
Very, very true. Interesting take. Tyler, I'll give you your response here in a second. I'm just curious, since you mentioned swordsman, Gary, have we had an interaction with Joffrey and Jaime in any previous interesting experiences? Like, hearing that we talked about, the first time here, Jaime has really had a scene with Joffrey. He puts him down and, what have you done, Uncle? What's so great about you? Have we had any previous scene to compare that to, where he's like talked up his uncle or said how great Cersei is? I don't think so. This is like the first real interaction we've seen with them, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe. I mean, the only chance they would have had to be together would have been episode 1-ish, maybe into 2, before they leave back for King's Landing there. But then Jaime basically meets his father. Well, no, Jaime's in the capital. There's no interaction between Joffrey and Jaime in the capital there. Jaime leaves the capital after he's attacked Ned Stark to go to his father. And then Jaime's captured, so there's not really any chance for them two to interact with one another.
Interesting. Yeah. So maybe there's always been contention there. It's just interesting. I just thought of that hearing you talk about him talking up his sword plainness. Tyler, what's your thoughts on the question that I had?
Yeah, to go back to your question there, I would pretty much agree with all the points that Gary laid out there. Jaime just sees himself as like one of the best fighters in all of Westeros there. And I think that point even came up too, of like when he lost his hand, he basically lost who he was, because his sword fighting abilities really defined him for the longest time there. And now that he doesn't have that anymore, he's having to figure out who is Jaime Lannister, to not to get like too existential on us. Gary.
I agree with both those points.
Also feel like even if he doesn't have any great deeds before he lost his hand, he could have still been written as a great, like eloquent bullshit, as like Jaime Lannister was the greatest swordsman in the kingdom, second only to Barristan Selmy, and the other stories would have been like what he had done in battle next to the king, because that's, I feel like, how a Kingsguard would gain the prestige, is in acts of bravery defending the king or the queen or the royalty. But since Joffrey became king, or since Robert became king, Robert was in peacetime. They've been in peacetime. And while he was, I don't know, with the Mad King, I feel like they would have whited out anything great he did for the Mad King in that book. Like anything that somebody did that is like an honor to a shitty dictator, they just kind of clear out. Tyler?
I was going to ask you, Nick, this is more of like a kind of a history lesson question here. Arthur Dane was mentioned a lot. Like Arthur Dane, somebody mentioned in the books as one of the greatest sword fighters that ever was. He was before Jaime's time, right? Kind of essentially.
Yes. Sir Arthur Dane was a Dornish, one of the Southern Kingdom's greatest warriors. I think he's referenced in one of the first couple seasons as a great swordsman and someone who was, I think, killed during Robert's Rebellion. Not trying to spoil too much going on right now. And so, yeah, killed during Robert's Rebellion. Jamie probably would have been aware of him, but someone who was much more his senior. So not necessarily on his level to compete with, but someone that was probably alive when he was alive, but it would have been like I'm guessing here, someone like a 12-year-old to probably like an established 30-year-old or something like that.
Okay. All right.
I agree with both. I agree with both those points you guys had. I think when Jamie lost his hand, he said, "I was that hand." So yeah, very much so. Interesting.
So that'll be some of my points to start the episode off with. We'll turn it over to Gary. What do you got for us for this episode?
I made a note that Sansa says she does not pray anymore in the Godswood. She just goes there for peace and quiet.
Oh yeah.
My group question is, has Sansa given up on the old gods? What would be in the Godswood? Or did she stop believing in the old gods and she puts her faith in the light of the seven? Tyler?
I would say it's really just truly Sansa is in, I don't know if shock is really the right word, but basically she's just utterly destroyed there. Her entire family, as far as she's aware, has been basically wiped off the map there. She is the last, again, as far as she knows, she's the last surviving Stark member there. She's probably, and I mean, she's not that old, so she's probably still trying to come to grips with the fact that she's it. There's nobody else in her family left there. There's nobody else that she can talk to as a fellow Stark there. So yes, she goes to the Godswoods, not to pray anymore, to get away from people, but I'm not going to say she's completely lost her faith in any of the gods, though. Nick?
I agree with that. At the end, you had commented, Gary, about like to start praying towards rather the old gods, the new gods, and the point seven, in the light of the seven. I don't think that she's moved on. I think it's just that people will leave her alone, and she's aware of that. She's been in the capital enough. She knows how some of these things work. Like she knows that people will talk to her because she's a lady and because of her family name. But yeah, being able to get that reprieve is something that she wants. I had a question, a thought of that too, about being the last Stark. Have we had confirmation or have we heard that she has heard from Winterfell that Theon killed her two youngest brothers? Is that something that we heard reach the Capitol's news? All council commented about something with that?
Because that is the information Ramsay Bolton has. No, Lord Bolton.
You're right, but has that been passed back down?
I believe so, because the Capitol knew that Sansa was the key to the North, because once Robb was dead, Sansa and Tyrion's next child would be the heir of the North. So sure. I think that's known information.
Yeah, that would make sense. They wouldn't jump to her over male lineage with Anne or Rickon. So, okay. Interesting. Just, yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's something where she's just looking to get away because she is in that, distraught turmoil inside of understanding what the implications are for her family. It's new territory. And I think she's always had the hope that she'd somehow make it back to her mother or that Robb would destroy, Joffrey. I think Joffrey even had that comment about when he killed Ned. He's like, maybe I'll kill your brother and give you his head as well. And she, was like, maybe he'll give me yours, And so she's like had this hope still that there's some fight left in her. And now I think that, a lot of that fight is gone, but I don't think she's moved on to another trajectory quite yet.
I guess my question that I go back to was whether or not you sense that there was a strong old gods connection with Sansa, because she's the oldest daughter, sure. And I don't know if you ever get a good sense with Robb how good his. However, if they're around Ned and they're on Catelyn, in the time of need, Catelyn sows the star, and that's specifically a token from the Light of the Seven. it's not an old gods tradition. So it's maybe just a sign that she still holds, like, in her heart, like the things she grew up with, whereas a child of the North might only have known the old gods. The family Stark worships the old gods, and so maybe that's why I just asked if we thought there was any if she had lost her hope, because she obviously grew up in a family with two different belief systems. Tyler?
So first point is Nick, you hit on it, I think, absolutely perfectly there, of like the little bit of hope she had left of Rob coming to save her at the end of the day is gone now, which again utterly just crushes her. And the second point kind of ties into a little bit with what you were saying there, Gary, of how like this, and this might become a lot more apparent kind of in later seasons here, of how the Stark children kind of sway one way or the other to like which parent, to Ned or Catelyn there. It's like you kind of get the sense Catelyn and Sansa were kind of more on their side because Catelyn is from the Riverlands. They held with kind of the new gods, the seven-pointed star there. And you can kind of see a little bit of how Sansa takes on a lot more from her mother there, it seems like. And then
Bran
Arya is the other
Bran
one.
Raven.
I mean, Bran is his own separate thing with the three-eyed raven there, but then like Arya, I mean, from her being a little bit more of a tomboy, you kind of get the sense that she's a little bit more on Ned's side of everything there. Nick?
Agree. The phrase that came to my mind was kind of like how they come into their own. Since the Stark children are all fairly young, they're all young. Even Robb, who's the oldest, is still, kind of seen as the young one on the battlefield. Strong in his own right, but young. The story is really, Robert asking Ned talking to Catelyn, then Ned deciding to go to the capital. And then, where we are now in the story, fast forward a couple episodes, all that's kneecapped. So it's really then the story of the Stark children, and like you're trying to get to, I think, Gary, what do they have from their past to know what to do to move forward on? And then also, like you're saying, Tyler, who are they kind of becoming like? Either what they've learned from patience and perseverance from their mother, or tact and aggression and skill from their father.
I guess also, as we talk about children and like which parent they take after, I can't stop thinking about Joffrey, how he gets this great fucking sword, like a sword that like is truly an honor, and he just kind of whacks at a book with it. Like I've never got the sense that he is a graceful tactician in battle, unlike Jaime Lannister, his biological father, or Robert Baratheon, his father in name alone, who used to swing a great warhammer. I don't think you've ever seen a single scene where he is training in battle. Like, the Starks start with a scene where all of the boys are training in archery. You've never seen any of those children train in combat. Anyway, Nick?
Excellent point, too, the comparison between the way the families are raised. Yeah, no, Joffrey is nothing in battle. He was cowardly scurried away during the Battle of the Blackwater. He's only ever had a sword on him for ceremonial purposes. And again, he doesn't just whack a book, he whacks the book that was the gift from Tyrion that he gave him. That was like something. So anywho, I threw off my point. Just the way he handles it is very poor. He doesn't really know what to do with it, so it's interesting. But what was the other point I was going to say? Something about the way that the children handle themselves with the weapon. Yeah, he's not very skilled. He's just spoiled. Just because absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'd say the only weapon that we've ever seen him use is the crossbow, but that's more so just like something to fidget with. Something he's wound up and used a couple times and showed off to Marjorie, and killed Ross with. So it's just something that he has. It's not a weapon that he's training with per se.
Yeah, I would definitely say that Joffrey, though, more or less takes after his mother there, the quick to anger there, the temperament and stuff like that. But he's obviously gone beyond his mother because he is the king, and as you say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. One thing I want to call out here too is the shot of the statue. You now see that is at King's Landing of Joffrey with his crossbow and a dead direwolf with an arrow in its head standing below him. And it's like,
Where is
wow,
this
that
at?
thing got built quickly.
In the
It's
garden.
in one of the
In the
gardens
garden
there.
while you're watching.
Right.
Who's in the garden? I was
Sansa,
actually called
probably.
out a different animal, and Melissa, my Marv, called out a wolf. I thought it was a boar originally, to symbolize the boar that killed his father, and Joffrey standing heroically, Captain Morgan style, over the boar that killed his father.
Catch.
But upon a pause, it's got more wolfy hands. But I thought a boar would have been a much more legendary story, that Joffrey killed the boar that killed his father.
No,
Like, that's a better story.
that would-
Killing
that
a dire wolf.
That would require him to care about his father.
killing the
I think
wolf
that he
is
cares
much
much
bigger. 'Cause
cares
it's-
much more about vanquishing the foes of the realm to make himself look better.
Yeah, it symbolizes him ending
wolf
the
might
war.
be much bigger, but the boar has more historical significance. Like,
Joffrey don't give a crap about history.
And they killed the
is
boar
true.
that killed his father anyways, too. So
this is true.
True, yeah, they can all come.
Anyway, just wrapping up my point about the Joffrey's swordsmanship, I just think about all of the great, like, he had Jaime there, he had Sir Barristan Selmy, he had talented swordsmen around him, but nobody ever thought, and Jaime didn't ever care enough, or Tywin didn't ever care enough to send somebody to train, or the mountain that rides. Like, if you're ever going to have somebody teach you how to run a sword, it's the mountain that rides.
oh yes, perfect person, Gregor Clegane.
Yeah. Number 3, top 3 hero. He's moving up to number 2 now, I guess, because something happened to my other favorite people. Anyway, Tyler, do you want to take the next point, or do you want me to continue?
What else you got, Gary?
I just quickly pointed out that when Shay left, one of Cersei's spies caught her, which on a rewatch I was like, I didn't remember that a spy caught her, like, and that led to some other plot points kind of being escalated. Like, I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Anyway, Tyler.
So I want to talk about this Shay point, but bridge it kind of between both episodes we watched here. It seems like Shay is slightly like, I don't know if they meant to portray this or whatever, woman becoming unhinged or whatever like that. I don't think they really meant it like that. It's like she is slowly becoming unhinged by what she feels is going on around her with Tyrion there. Like, she thinks Tyrion sent Varys to talk to her to, like, shuttle her out of the city there, when really Varys did that on his own, as we found out, because Tyrion had no idea what she was talking about when she brought that up to him. And then there's, like, multiple times where, like, Shay is in these rooms with Tyrion and she shouldn't be, like, doing what she's doing there because somebody could walk in on them and something like that. And Tyrion's supposed to be this person who just married someone and trying to keep his vows and stuff like that. So my question kind of is like, do we think Shay is just kind of more or less losing it? Or is she, like, truly devoted to Tyrion that she's, like, wanted to do that? Or she have another motive kind of going on there too?
I think she's become emboldened, but I think we've talked about this in the past. Shay is a very interesting character, and their dynamic is very interesting. And on a rewatch, obviously you see different things in the conversation with Shay, because obviously, not a spoiler, she gets on the ship and she comes back somewhere else in the story.
Well, there's also a scene too of Tywin mentioning to have her brought to the Tower of the Hand there.
Before the wedding.
Before the
Before the
wedding.
wedding.
Yep, that's the key point there too.
So,
Good context too for like the timeline before the wedding.
do you want to pause that point? Pause the
Yep.
Shay point for a bit?
Sure.
Okay. The next item I had was the word of the day that I looked up. Pycelle is a lecher. And I had to Google what a lecher is. Is a
Here, you
man
of all
given...
people should know what a lecher is.
In the intro, the one thing I was like, "What's the joke of the day?" I was like, "I'm not gonna make any jokes about being a lecher. That's the line. I'm not gonna cross that line. Just gonna stay right there."
Telling on yourself.
I know a lot of words. I know a lot of bad words. I know a lot of bad things from the dark corners of the internet. Didn't know what a lecher was. So take that as you may, Nick and Tyler. Tyler, did you know what a lecher was?
I honestly don't think I do.
Okay, Nick, fuck you. Not everyone knows what a lecher is. A man given to excessive sexual indulgences. So on the rewatch, as you watch that scene, Cersei calls Pycelle a lecher, and it's like, I wouldn't let that lecher touch me, because Cersei went to not the
Qyburn.
Maester, Qyburn. And later on in the next episode, not a spoiler, probably, is that Cersei sends a different person to go see that same guy, and not Pycelle. So I looked up the word lecher. It's my word of the day, and it also colors on a rewatch. It colors what people actually think of Pycelle, because on the initial surface layer, I didn't think that anyone ever knew that he was a creepy old bastard, and that Cersei obviously did not trust him, sort of that doctor feeling when you do you feel comfortable enough with a doctor to have them see your naughty bits, and obviously she does not feel. Nick's surfacing that he wants to spoon up the porridge. I don't know what that means. Nick, what do you got?
I don't have to end in the middle of it. I was going to say, I think a couple people understand who Pycelle really is. Remember, in an earlier episode, Tyrion comes in on him, and he's got a woman in bed with him. He says, I don't like his beard, and has Bronn slice his beard and threaten to cut off his manhood, and he throws him in the black cells. So I think that people in the small council who are paying attention, probably Varys, with those little birds that whisper things to him, maybe Baelish, just because Littlefinger knows crap about everybody, they do know his tendencies, but for theatricality or who he's pretending to be, Pycelle thinks maybe nobody knows about him.
Read that as him being a very powerful man that obviously can afford to get his jollies off, and
Sure,
that was
he's
all it
Grandmaster.
was to be that.
Basically.
But in the calling him a lecher, obviously Cersei implies that he has he has darker sexual fantasies. Tyler?
This isn't a spoiler because it's a deleted scene, but I remember the scene because I stumbled across it one day. There's a scene that he cut out of the show of Tywin out fishing in King's Landing there, and Grand Maester Pycelle comes kind of slowly walking up to him to deliver, I think, a message or something like that. And Tywin basically just turns to him and says, quit acting like you are or whatever. And it's basically shown Tywin knows what's going on with Grand Maester Pycelle, so Pycelle stands upright like he should there, basically. And it's just a great scene of how, again, like you guys are saying, there's people who know, and Tywin being the person that he is, he knows Pycelle is acting a fool.
Saying as the audience, I had never dug that deep. So it was a new word, new lesson. Any other thoughts on lechers, or you want to continue? The other fun quote is, while Jon is on trial, someone who's a former Targaryen, I got the nod, gets asked, how do you know he was telling the truth? I was like, how a man is telling the truth? I grew up in King's Landing. That was like a good burn. I feel like also on a surface level, if you missed a previous scene that explains that he's the last Targaryen, that you could just gloss over completely. Tyler?
So, number one, it's been quite a while since I've gotten to say this. Fuck Alistair Thorne. His fucking bullshit there. But then the other thing to too is point out is
I defend a lot of people. I don't defend Alistair Thorne.
then also too to note Janos Slint is now there as part of the council
Yes.
there in the Night's Watch because he was sent to the wall by Tyrion there for when Tyrion was
former,
basically clearing out.
leader of the Kingsguard.
What
But,
is
yeah.
Janos Slint's title in the Kingsguard? I
He
don't know
was
if there's
the-
ever.
He wasn't the King's Guard. He was the head of the City Watch.
Oh, what? Sorry.
The
What
gold
is his
cloaks.
title in the
Night's Watch.
Night's Watch?
He's
Thank you.
someone because he's at the table, but I don't know if we
I
know.
think he's just got a place at the table there. I don't think they really go into the hierarchy of the Night's Watch other than the Lord Commander is about it. There's more. I think more of that comes up later on in the show when they get talking about some stuff there. But as far as I think we're aware right now, there's not really too much hierarchy to the Night's Watch other than Maester Aemon there and Lord Commander Mormont. But I mean, like,
Hold on. Would he be the head of the Rangers, the Stewards, the? Because remember the Builders, the Rangers, the Stewards, the Builders. I think that would line up with the four people at that table. That maybe perhaps he's the head of
see
one
that,
of those
sure.
classes.
highly possible too. Also, too, like him being there, you can tell he's made friends with Alistair Thorne
Alistair
there because
Thorne.
he's just an arrogant asshole there, trying to put down
Weasels hang with
again
weasels.
Jon Snow. This is the part where Jon Snow is basically standing trial there at the Night's Watch for what he did basically with the wildlings, and you could tell he's just being an arrogant asshole because he knows, as far as the realm knows, Ned Stark was a traitor to the realm there and everything like that. And Jon Snow is the bastard of Ned Stark, so of course Janos Slint just keeps throwing that back at Jon, like you're the bastard son of a traitor. And it's like, fuck you, dude.
Talking about the crimes that John has committed, I thought it was interesting too that for all the preface that we've heard about honoring the code of the Night's Watch, when the four people at the top of the table reference he slept with, someone, Maester Aemon comments, if we put to death everyone who slept with someone and broke their vows or slunk off to Molestown, one of the small towns south of the Castle Black, the wall would be manned by headless men. So these people know multiple people who have forsaken their vows. Clearly a lot of them, which I thought was just an interesting little side note revelation. But that apparently breaking your vows happens a lot. I mean, obviously they're going after John because he is quote unquote the bastard son of a traitor.
Breaking
But
that.
but also,
rule
yeah,
of their
but it was,
vows.
well, because it's highlighted for them because it was with a wildling too, the sworn enemy of the Night's Watch. So it was just an interesting little anecdote too that happens a lot apparently.
Just remember, Nick, the wildlings, they're not our kind. They're not our people. Everyone
Us and
south
them.
of the wall is our people.
Got to build that wall.
Racist.
Yeah, it's a very nice reflection on society there. Not one of us there, pretty much. So you did the badder thing. Gary, have anything else?
Lots of people name their swords. Yes, lots of.
Thank you, Gregor or Sandra.
Also,
Clegane.
I find it interesting as we talk about the swords, the two swords. The name of the episode is The Two Swords, isn't it?
Yes.
And then the Hound makes a statement like that. Like, I don't think either of the swords are named in these two episodes. Maybe one is.
Nice.
But I think that's
Actually, two swords are named, or we reference names of both swords.
Jaime's sword is not named. In a later episode, I think the one given to the Joffrey is named. I don't know if it sticks, but maybe a sword is okay. We'll have to go back. I thought a previous sword's name was Heart Eater. Maybe that was the sword he had during the Battle of the Blackwater. It was Heart Eater. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing that like we have these two swords, and obviously the Hound says fuck people who name their swords. Because obviously for the Hound, that's something that like great lords do. Also, maybe it's just something you do when you have a Valyrian steel blade that you assume will be a family heirloom. Anyway, the last time I had was that Arya got her payback with Needle. Going back to I think like season 1, where a random boy who's holding the helmet gets stabbed because he like hurt his leg, and this same guy is like, "Oh, you can't walk. You'll have to carry me." And he just like stabs the little kid in the throat.
Something else, yeah.
He has a name, but I can't remember. Poliver? No, I think that's. Is it?
Oh no, that's somebody else.
I think that's the guy.
I think that's somebody else. Yeah,
that kid doesn't have a name.
He has a name. Arya mentions it there, but I can't recall it for the life of me.
Anyway, it's kind of a fun playback to that scene because obviously Arya like gets her payback, but also Arya is kind of in the background of that scene for quite a while, like just really enjoying watching the Hound fight. And obviously she doesn't have a horse in this race because other than she wants that one guy to die. But yeah, she doesn't help much until the very end, and then she like stabs a guy in the back. She stabs 2 people, and then she stabs the one kid, the guy with the needle. But I thought it was a fun end of the scene, and obviously it also the episode ends with her galloping off on her own little white pony. So I just thought it was a fun scene. Nick?
3 things I have in there. You completely glassed over the fact that Sandor makes his amazing eating all the chickens in the establishment reference in that scene. That's an amazing scene where the more that particular guy who has Needle, who's like the leader, who's just going on and on about how they can do whatever they want. You know, Rob's dead. The Starks are gone. You know, we own the country. Come with us and you can rape and pillage anyone you want. You know, like, yeah, of course he needs to die before that scene concludes. But yeah, every time he says something, Sandor just talks about how one more word comes pouring out of your mouth. I'm going to eat every chicken in this establishment. It's just an amazing interchange. 2, yeah, I think that the scene is named Two Swords, but it is well written in this story that it kind of bookends with the beginning of this one sword being made into 2 swords, but also it kind of ties into this other sword finding its way back to its original master. I think it's pretty cool the way it's written because Needle has a name. Yeah, you know, Sandor may not like it, but it's very personal. It's something that's home, quote unquote, for Arya. Something that's like, hey, a part of me has been found again. So I think that's a neat little interchange.
It is her last family heirloom.
Sure. You know, it was, who gave it to her? Jon, right? And when her dad found it, he's like, make sure you train with it. And then that's what started this Cyril, well, that's not his name, but the trainings with him as well.
So, the first sword of Braavos.
Exactly. So there's a lot of history behind it and what it means to her. That's all I'm saying. So it's kind of interesting that the 2 swords, might be the death of one, Ice, and the way of finding home for another one, Needle. And then yeah, at the very end too, because the first time we see them in this new season, she's begging Sandor, I want my own horse. And he's like, what the hell would you do with your own horse? Well, you know, you'd ride away. No, I want a horse. I don't want to ride with you everywhere. And so it's interesting that this episode ends where she does get her own pony that she can ride.
I wanted to mention too, just Gary touched on how like the episode ends there of just that shot of Sandor and Arya riding off on the road there, and they pan out, and it's just the fields basically from war have been burned and charred to a crisp. I think it's just like an amazing kind of shot there of just how the after effects of war that you don't really see a lot of the times there. Gary?
I'm going to point out that I think I noticed it every time I watch it that the conversation between the Lannister guy and the Hound sort of blooms like an onion, where as soon as Sandor's like, fuck you. The guy says, "Oh, I did hear that you turned tail and ran from the, abandoned your post during the Battle of Blackwater." So it's really telling that this guy knew that he was a traitor, but he still gave him the benefit of the doubt and wanted to hear if there was a larger story, or just wanted the Hound, knowing enough about the Hound, knowing he's kind of a despicable fuck, that he would be his sorts of peoples. Tyler?
The Hound has a code. He says so clearly. He has a code.
Yeah.
Did you have
The
anything
Hero of the
else?
Revolution has a code too, Tyler.
Oh, I'm sure he does, yes. Did you have anything else, Gary?
That is all I have for episode 1 of season whatever we're on.
Season 4. You're up, Nick.
That was it that I had for the end of the episode too. Yeah, just it's bookended well about the swords, and then the comment about how Arya kind of gets like what she wanted in a sense. It was also, I think they commented the first time she killed someone, wasn't it?
It's the second time
I
at
think it was
least.
the morning King's Landing.
Well, nope, yep. The third time, I guess. She technically stabbed that guy at the stables at King's Landing. She stabbed somebody at that little camp shortly after the Hound and her left the twins there, where those guys were bragging about sewing the direwolf's head on
That's
top
right.
of Rob's corpse, and then killing
That's
this
right.
guy with needle here. So I think it's at least number 3.
This one was definitely relished the most. In the do it once, maybe get lucky. Do it twice, okay, you're doing it with intent. The third time, there was motive. Like, she went through her whole little interchange of what this particular guy had said to that boy. As she then, at the very end, what's the matter? Cat got your tongue? And stabbed through his throat. So it was deliberate, it was intent, and there was definitely malice behind her words.
But this guy did not get a name in her list of assassinations, did
I don't
he?
believe so.
I swear isn't his name Polliver? Like I almost think his name is Polliver, and I'm pretty for sure he was
I
in
think they do.
Arya's
Maybe
list.
they name in this episode.
But
Nick has
anyways.
carpal tunnel. Wants to show you his T-Rex claws as useless.
Anyway, so yeah, that does conclude, I guess, episode 1. So we'll move on to episode 2 here, The Lion and the Rose. Did you find something, Nick?
I just searched Polliver Game of Thrones, and it is that guy's picture.
Okay.
It was walking off to Sander.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Polliver was in Arya's list there. All right, so The Lion and the Rose. Joffrey and Marjorie's wedding has come. Tyrion breaks up with Shay. Ramsay tries to prove his worth to his father. And Bran and company find a weirwood tree. Gary, since the hero of the revolution starts off this episode, I'll turn it over to you.
I thought it was a good cold open for an episode of like, where could you be? Like all the places we've jumped. I think the only place you could completely count out was where Daenerys was, because she's in the desert. I thought it was a good character building scene. You get to see what you find out later is the Kennel Master's daughter, who obviously is BFFs with Ramsay Snow. But also like that he really enjoys the hunt, and I think the crime that this lady did was just offending his lady. Nick, shaking that finger like a Polaroid camera. What can we do for you?
I had a question on this. He says Tansy, like Tansy, don't want Tansy. Is Tansy the blonde who was also seducing Theon when they took it? Is that who she was?
I think you're making
Like,
believe that. Yeah.
In this rewatch, on this rewatch, I was looking at it because it's a blonde and it's the same girl. Miranda, is that her name?
Miranda, yeah, I believe it's the other girl.
Miranda, the other girl who's at his side with the arrow, who's shooting at him, at her. And I think that's because he's like, she was just too pretty. She whatever. And because she was saying, I did what you asked. She was being chased. So I was waving my finger to clarify, is that who that was? Because on this rewatch, I kind of like put two and two together from having recently seen that other episode that I think that's who it is. Like no one is safe from Ramsay. If he decides that, oh, I don't like you anymore, or I don't need you anymore, like clearly he's just having sport with her.
Okay, Nick, the deep dark destruction of Lord Greyjoy into Reek. Is this a destruction of something that Lord Greyjoy loves? I've forgotten his first name.
Theon?
Theon. Because like the last time he had his lovable bits was when she was in the room. So is that one more way to just destroy Theon's like soul? Is to destroy like this woman who to Ramsay is very disposable. Tyler?
I think Theon is pretty much, if not at bottom, pretty much near bottom already. So I don't think this really had any effect, especially since she would have been involved in him losing his favorite bits there. This is just this is more of a scene just showing not only Ramsay's despicableness, but also the brokenness that was Theon Greyjoy, and now
I
is
think it's
this
assumed
Reek.
that Theon has like there's been a while that Theon's been under torture that's not been shown. Nick?
Correct. I think that there is. I was going to agree with what Tyler's saying. I think if anything, it's just, you know, Reek, as he's now become, is just distraught at seeing another human being destroyed in such a way. It's nothing necessarily that he's like beheld to or terrified about or that he feels some compassion to. Her as a person, it's just as another human being, I have to watch her be destroyed by these dogs. I was going to comment, I feel like in conversations when this episode first aired, I had heard from someone who had read the books, and they said that like there is no reference to Theon. It's like written in such a way that the character Reek is running around with them. And you're almost like, who the heck is Reek? He's not referenced as Reek is Theon until later in the written books, in the novels, and then also in this episode we see later someone references who he is.
So yeah, you're partially right there. For the first introduction of the Reek character in the books there, it's not really clearly known that he is Theon. It definitely becomes more and more kind of explained as it goes on that he is Theon Greyjoy there. But also though too, part of the thing is, and this is further on in the books, that it talks about from Roose that there was another thing named Reek that was Ramsay's plaything at one point in time until he mysteriously disappeared there. Gary?
I was gonna say, like, I'm pretty sure that Reek exists at Winterfell while Theon is there. Like, I thought it was introduced as a different character that shows up in Winterfell. And I didn't, obviously, this is around the time in the book where I sort of dropped off and couldn't keep up, but I believe, I just assumed that they just mixed these characters together, but the character being renamed later would make sense too. Tyler?
So yeah, I believe you are right. There was a Reek at Winterfell with Theon there, but I know that Reek disappears and then Theon becomes Reek in the books at some point in time there too, because there's a bunch of like descriptive talk of like, because I think you get character perspectives from Reek then in the book there, where he's kind of having visions of the sea and a drowned god and stuff like that, of basically relating it to being Theon, and then also to the character Reek in the book is dressed up as a noble Theon there to go try and lure some people out of a fort there in the book. But anyways.
Interesting.
Do you want to talk about Shay at this point, or?
Yeah, I could keep going on my rant against Shay here. um,
Against Shay?
Against her, because yeah, so we've touched on this a little bit too with like the last episode. She's definitely become more reckless and everything because Tyrion keeps talking to her. This is a dangerous place. You can't be doing this all the time. We are going to get caught. Something is going to happen there. He doesn't want anything to happen to her. And then basically Tyrion essentially just finally, like there's another scene set up where he finally just ends up breaking it off with her, because I think he's come to the conclusion that he cares for her enough that he needs to get her out of the city, to get her out of harm's way, away from him, because there's nothing really further he can do. He is married to Sansa. He is trying to be a somewhat honest, faithful person in this relationship. Not only, I think, maybe a little bit for himself, but also too because he knows Sansa has gone through so much, and to add more shame to her would just be kind of, in his mind, kind of degrading to her. So he feels now that he's trying to push out this person, Shay, because he doesn't want anything to happen to Shay, but also because of the circumstance surrounding Sansa.
Yeah, Sansa doesn't need any more dishonor. And his final, like, fuck you is, Sansa is fit to bear my children, and you are not. And she's just, like, bawling. And then, yeah, he sends Bronn in. And, like, Bronn's like, okay, like, let's escort you out. And then she just fucking backhands Bronn. And he's just like, why am I this fucker's errand boy all the time? Nick?
Like, they call each other out, too, where he's like, he asks her, how many men have you been with, right? 100 or so? And yeah, and she says the same thing back, almost like, how many women have you been with? 10,000? And they're just, it's like all the gloves have come off,
and he makes no fucking apologies.
Gone.
Like, I've been with many women. I've loved many women. I was with you.
I loved you most, though.
I
said I've been with many, and I've loved you most.
You, like something like that. It was.
He cares about her. Like, when I was watching that scene, the words were hurtful, but the way he's trying to say them too, like he's struggling. He does care about her. The words he's saying are extremely hurtful, and that fact that he's saying it is what finally drives her out the door with Bronn.
I think he is saying the absolute worst things because he just needs her to hate him enough to walk out of the room.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with what he believes. It's that he needs to hurt her feelings enough that she will accept the offer of getting on a ship, and then maybe over time he can send her some gifts, and make the apology. But I also think about he had to buy a ship and all this. I've always been really confused as to how Tyrion acquires and purchases things, as he's the only credentials he has is as a Lannister, but he still has to get that money or that gold from somebody.
No.
So I don't know. Nick?
No, he doesn't. Isn't he master of coin at this point?
You're probably true. Or he just pays in favors.
I'm sure that being a Lannister, just being anywhere, once you're back at home, since he's back in the capital, he has access. They don't have bank accounts per se, but I'm sure he has access to the chests that have his gold or his coins in them back at the capital. But also, I think he's master of coin at this point, so I'm sure that he has access to funds enough that he can just, write in the books how to do whatever, and then, pass off some money to a ship captain to get a ship. So. My question is still sort of talking about this Shay and Tyrion interaction. What do we think Shay's motivation is here? Clearly she wants to be with Tyrion. But do you think that she is ignoring his concerns because she's not just scared of Tywin and she thinks that they'll get away with it? Do you think that there's something deeper there? What's her motive for trying to stick around when clearly he and Varys and several other people are telling her it's dangerous, you need to leave?
I think she's definitely trying to further her position a little bit more somehow. She might be able to further her position in life a little bit more somehow. Because I think Amanda had mentioned this in one of the previous discussions we had on her. Her not being afraid of Tywin is kind of odd because everybody basically in Westeros knows who Tywin Lannister is. So her not really fearing Tywin is kind of an odd thing, which everyone can have the bravado and gumption to say, I'm not afraid of anyone here. Nobody, I fear no man or whatever. But Tywin's kind of, I think, more of an exceptional case there of to not know who Tywin is and not be afraid of Tywin is kind of suspect to me. Gary?
I just for the longest while I've just assumed it was ignorance, that she is just so ignorant. And I think she means to belittle Tyrion as someone who's afraid of what Daddy'll do or what his sister will do. Like, I think she's just ignorant to like how backstabbing his family is. Like, and like from the outside looking in, like maybe she just doesn't believe that any family could be this fucking cutthroat. But I don't know. Like, we've talked about it before that like is she secretly a spy? Is there something other conversations going on? And I think it's also alluded to if maybe either Cersei or Tywin got to her before she got shipped off on a ship, like, or if she was she is just a shit character that's not very well explained. Like,
I wouldn't say she's a shit character that's not explained really. She's a lower level character that doesn't really get much like background explanation to her there really. Like she's a good character for what she is, but as far as like
She's
motives and everything like that, she's obviously the foil for Tyrion there because she's able to dish it back to Tyrion just as well as Tyrion can dish it to anyone else. And Tyrion obviously cares for her, but I think you are kind of right there and hitting the nail on the head saying she's kind of an ignorant character there of not really understanding how dangerous these people are that she's kind of surrounded herself with. I mean, I still kind of think that she's somewhat trying to better her position in life with Tyrion there. And again, going back to the point of like not knowing who Tywin Lannister is just a big red flag to me. But I think she is just definitely ignorant to the ways of like much like Ned Stark almost kind of was to the way politics are played in King's Landing there of people will stab you in the back if it would further their position.
interesting takes. I don't have a right or wrong answer. I was just curious.
no, you just have a wrong answer, Nick. That's just
When it refers
just
to
leave it
you,
there.
it's always the wrong answer. We don't have time to go back. We spent too much time talking on swords, but I just realized we completely skipped all of the talk about Dany in Marine last episode.
For the
I was
listeners,
just like, oh crap.
Tyler and I gave just a whatever sort of look into the camera, like, whatever.
There's good stuff there.
I
We
mean,
don't have to go back. I was just
Go for it, Nick, there, if you want to
Yeah,
talk
Nick,
about it a little bit here.
go shine your
We were
sword.
talking about you were talking about the intentions behind the female characters, and I forget who, either you or Gary, said something about something, and it made me think of Dany's intentions, and I was like, oh crap, yeah, like because there's some good interactions there. We're introduced to a brand new Dario Naharis.
Nope.
Oh, and
What?
No.
yeah, he's sitting there holding his sword out in front of him with Grey Worm. She's like the last person holding their sword gets to walk at the back of the line. And there's like there's all this.
It's a new actor playing Dario.
It's a new actor playing Dario, and he is giving her flowers and talking about how you need to get to know the people in Marine. And there's so much interaction there that we glazed over in just our conversation because there's long talks there. But it was interesting to hear a different take on Dany, where in the past she's Dracarys'd her way into taking over what she wanted, but that might not work now in Marine. Even with the bolstered army that she has and the generals that were with her. So that was all. Just my interesting conversations there can go deeper, but Gary's going to give me the wrap-up sign.
I was just going to say, Nick, if you feel so strongly, maybe next time you'll take notes. Boom. Tyler?
One thing to point out from Dany's scene, though, is the interaction she's having with her dragons there, of they're slightly becoming a little bit wilder and not really responding as much to her as, at least it's kind of made to appear that, with like Drogon kind of hissing back at her, and she's kind of like taken aback by that. And Jorah has to kind of remind her they're wild creatures, Dany, there.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. I know Stephen would love to chime in about how much he appreciates Dany being explained and detailed as the hero of the story, so I'll give a little nod to him and move on.
Yes. I was going to say, like, and then there was kind of obviously trying to paint what's his name? I forgot his name. As a gambler.
Dario.
Dario. Also, kind of a segue that I know will happen in the next episode is she has the people take the girl down.
Slaves
And
were
she
crucified,
says,
yes.
take her down, bury her, and keep the collar.
Remove the
Or
collar
something.
from her
Remove the collar from her.
before you bury
And
her.
that
Yeah.
becomes relevant in the next episode.
Barristan Selmy says we can take them down for you, and she says, no, you'll do no such thing. You'll leave them up. I will see each of their faces, is what they say. She wants to see these people who
mile markers.
Yeah. She wants to see these people who are tormented because it gives her, focus and anger to do whatever she's going to do.
Another fun fact, Westeros does not run on the metric system.
Well, east of Westeros does not run on the metric system there.
So I just thought, as I said that, I was like, I think they said every mile. I was like,
yep.
Very few places, even in the global world we live in, do not run on the metric system, but apparently Westeros does not either. So,
being Westerners.
Anyway, that is. Can we end the wrap up for the thing that Nick forgot from the last episode? I didn't take any fucking notes on Dany. Boring.
Shame.
Go for it, Gary.
Okay, my next item was Stannis's wife's brother, Lord Axel Florent, is burned. Yeah. And so I had to look up the House Florent, and they are pledged to Highgarden. So by the house itself is sworn to the lady
Tyrells.
The Tyrells, who now are marrying their daughter off to Joffrey. However, specifically this house was sworn to Stannis because, Stannis' wife is from that house. So I just thought that was real interesting, and there was a lot of back and forth about how that's a real shady thing to do, and all it came down to was that they didn't pull down their idols of the seven, and so then he burned the Lord. It just seemed, and then his sister was just whatever.
She's loving it. She's all
excited
smiles
to see their souls fly away. But Nick,
yeah, it's just that she was excited. It speaks to the depravity that the people who are so fanatical in this world, the dangers they can do. Stephen would appreciate a good quote. Voltaire says that if they can make you believe absurdities, they can make you commit atrocities. Good stuff.
No one cares, Nick.
I care, Gary, and Stephen will care if he ever hears this.
Any other thoughts on the burning of House Florent?
Tragic.
Back to Bran. My point here was that we jump back to the Bran story, and then there's Bran's vision, which I took extensive notes. I think I had to pause that scene multiple times. A reflection to maybe Tyler, who's in the books. Are we at the point, because I know that Bran's story surpasses the written works that are currently published. Have we passed that point already?
Nope.
Okay, that's what's my character, because I know that that's not a spoiler, that at some point, some of these stories go past what is printed literature. So, I have Bran's vision. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that. I took a beat by beat post of it. Nick?
Yeah, it speaks to also transitioning from fanatics and what they believe to even the people who seem sort of grounded or losing their reality. Jojen is talking to Bran about, you can't stay in Summer's skin. It must be glorious to run and leap, or whatever he says. But Bran is like, I was just eating. He's like, Summer was eating. You just see what he sees. And it talks about how people are losing their grip on what's reality and what's not. And they say that, he would lose his mind. He wouldn't know them or he wouldn't remember them. And so there is an actual danger. We kind of learn bit by bit. Bran has these abilities, he's enjoying these abilities, well, but these abilities come at cost. So there's always a downside to everything.
Okay. So here's the notes I have about the beat by beat steps of Bran's vision: a tree, a three-eyed raven, the ravens in the crypts of Winterfell, a man sharpening a blade, perhaps Ned sharpening ice, which has obviously recently been divided. Then fire, possibly, the sword ice being burned, and then you see Ned Stark's eyes. Clouds rolling in a snowy area, a tree, the words "look for me," a raven, a weirwood tree or a tree with a face on it, a shadowy character in the woods, a flock of ravens, similar to the flock of ravens that saved Sam, roots, a tree. I believe it's already been explained that it was a White Walker's horse because you see the White Walker's horses when Sam, plot armors his way through the end of a couple, like 2 seasons ago. Then it's the throne room of King's Landing, covered in snow, an empty throne room, and I noticed the floor is covered in snow.
Destroyed.
No, it's covered in snow. There's walls.
No, it's destroyed.
And then there's a weird above the throne. There's the circle with the seven-sided star. And I don't think that's in the actual throne room. But you thought it was destroyed? Nick?
That 7-pointed star is behind the throne room. Every time we see the star, it is there. Because in the capital, at least, reigning religion is the light of the seven people there.
So I guess Nick will agree to disagree. Or we can just agree you're wrong and it's snow.
You are wrong. There's snow on the ground, but it shows that the throne room is destroyed. The roof is exposed.
Tyler, you'll be the tiebreaker. Snow or destruction. Tyler does not give a shit. We shall continue. The camera under kind of an icy lake, and you see a man above it. I have a good idea who this man is supposed to be. Not going to spoil it. A crow. Going back to crows, there's a lot of crows. And then the words, "He saw us." Bran falling from the tower in episode 1, going to a dragon shadow flying over a city, the completion of the scene of Bran falling from a tower in episode 1, a tree on a snowy hill with a sunrise in the distance, and then the wind blows the clouds past that scene. The words "north" is said. And then it ends with Bran releases his touch of the tree, and then it just goes to the next scene. So, as it's been very often assumed that there's lots of hidden meanings and random shit in this show, would you say that some of those pieces have some random meanings?
Definitely, yeah. There's definitely some scenes there. I think it's too. You've seen shots of King's Landing from above. I believe the shots of the dragon shadow flying over the city is supposed to be made to reference of it being King's Landing.
I would also make that assumption. I was trying to be vague, Tyler.
I'm pretty for sure we've seen the shot, like the layout of King's Landing and kind of what the buildings look like. So it's kind of made the assumption of this is King's Landing.
But anyway, I thought that was real interesting. Like, especially as like, I had to pause and rewind that, and HBO Max has real shit rewind skills because it's like 10 seconds back every time. But I just imagine watching it the first time, especially if you were watching it on cable television with no rewind, that would be real tough. Like, it just looks like just flashes of images that really you could blow past and never know. Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, I'll go to my next point.
I don't have anything. Go for it, Gary.
The next point was at the royal wedding. Joffrey is introduced as Joffrey of the houses Lannister and Baratheon. In that order. Lannister and Baratheon. Which also had me make a note that on the banner that Tyrion had in the last episode, it was a split there's a split banner left and right of 50% yellow and 50% red. Anyway, any other thoughts on other things at the royal wedding? I noticed after the cuts of the Queen of Thorns, she doesn't seem to be clapping. It just sort of gives a kind of a one shot of her. Tyler?
So I will make a note to put a pin in this part here. Sansa is given a necklace, the last episode, by the fool character who she had saved at the beginning of like season 2 there. The knight
Sir
who
Davos.
the knight who Joffrey was going to kill. Queen of Thorns comes up and talks to Sansa, putting her hands on her hair and stuff like that. And then you see in a brief shot after that, something is missing from Sansa's necklace there. I wonder
that
what
as well
that's
on the
about
rewatch.
there.
Very interesting. Something to look for.
Another thing on a rewatch. Yeah, Nick, did you have something? I had another thing at the royal wedding. Another observations. Nick, do you have something?
Yes. Are you talking about the royal wedding or the like dress rehearsal beforehand? Because when I brought it up last time, you said like before that hadn't happened yet. When he names his sword and smashes the book.
I think I'm at the actual royal
I think you are.
wedding. I don't think
Okay.
I made any notes about that like dress. No,
That was the interaction I had referenced earlier, where he does pull out the sword. He swipes at it because you commented about how he hacks away with his sword. He has no style sense, and I made the reference. He hits the book. Then when I mentioned it, you both were like, "No, it's just in the next stuff." So I was confused as well.
no,
but
I just
worries.
yeah.
he names his sword.
You
he
made it
names
sound
his sword.
really character developing, and it was really just a fuck you to Tyrion. Like has nothing,
Yeah.
and obviously.
Well,
Like-
not just to Tyrion, but also to Sansa, because he names his new Valyrian sword, which he swings around arrogantly, Widow's Wail, which just killed her whole family.
Anyway, yeah. Any other thoughts on that scene? Obviously, I'm jumping to the actual royal wedding about the groom's dinner or whatever the fuck that other earlier scene is.
Dress rehearsal, I think we technically called it.
Just if we do talk about the royal wedding, we're going to get to the end scene, which we need to because we're going
There
long.
yet? Calm your shit, motherfucker. Calm your shit.
Gary's getting more liberal with his expletives.
Sorry.
The lecture
Maybe
that
it's
he
an 11
is.
o'clock thing. Maybe profanity just comes out a little deeper after 11 o'clock.
Perhaps. I was the one note that I had, and then we can go to wherever that we did jump. And again, I was like Gary had commented, looking back at the video to find that scene. Also in this scene too, we see Jaime, who is stressed as a Lannister because everybody hates him apparently, find the one Lannister who is kind to him, Tyrion. Tyrion has a drink with him. And he's like, "It's just wine. Don't worry about spilling it. Knock it over," because he's refitted with a new golden hand. And Tyrion says that he can help him train with his left, and he does so by having him get in touch with Bronn, and Bronn helps him train as a left-handed swordsman. So again, to the comments we made earlier in this video, 5 hours ago, his identity and being who he is, or maybe helping him find a way to get back to his redemption, is in his swordplay and skill at arms. So that was something that I had down as a comment just about that had happened, and what your take on it was.
So, number one, this is the bromance starting between Jaime and Bronn there. Because it's kind of funny, Jaime hears the story from Bronn of why they're out where they are, because this is where Bronn takes the wife of some knight out to have his fun with her. And apparently she screams very loud. They're far enough away nobody can hear her. And then the other thing to note is this is another change from the book that I remember here, because it's not actually Bronn that Jaime trains with. During this time, I believe Jaime is sent away from King's Landing here after he's returned and everything. He gets sent away from King's Landing there to basically help some of the people they put in place there around the different parts of the realm, kind of maintain their ownership of the lands, maintain order and stuff like that. And Jaime ends up doing a lot of training then with Sir Ilan Payne. I think backstory is unfortunately the actor who played Ilan Payne in the show ended up passing away at some point in time there. So to kind of honor him, they just didn't really film any more scenes with him. They didn't recast him or anything like that.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
You train with somebody. He doesn't have a tongue, does he?
You can do sword fighting with somebody who doesn't have a tongue. He can still hear and understand.
It's what brings us together today.
No, that guy still has a tongue. He just has something else going on.
He doesn't. I think I'm different. We're going to.
I'm the one who goes off the rails.
Anyway, that's interesting. Time, but Ilan Payne. I did not realize that.
Yep.
But Nick and his bromances.
It's an interesting character, a relationship, Bronn and Jaime. Someone who doesn't really care much about who they are or their stature, as long as they get paid, and someone who is trying to redeem their stature.
I also noted on a rewatch, going back to the royal wedding, Sansa says the words, "We have a new queen," and Tyrion says, "Better her than you." Mm-hmm. So I think it's maybe a turn the page for Sansa that they have a new queen, and so that's kind of a page turn for her of a new chapter in what she hopes will be an upswing, or it's just it's interesting to hear her announce that. But obviously Tyrion also knows that although this is a new queen, you're winning here. This is good for you. So anyway, I think it was Nick who gave us the sassy fingers. You're up.
I also remembered on a rewatch, again, things you pick up, that the Karstarks had killed Martin and Willem Lannister, the two 12-year-old boys. And hey, little Willem Lannister shows back up as Tommen Baratheon, and standing there next to everybody else. And again, on a rewatch, it's something that you don't even notice, and you just start seeing the actor portray Tommen. But yeah, at the wedding itself, you see him standing there, and having just watched those episodes and knowing what we know up to this point, you're kind of like, didn't he just get killed by the Karstarks, and that caused the downfall of the Starks? So it was interesting. Yeah, I was like, oh, wait, that's right. It was interesting because there's a clear shot on the Baratheon standing there, Cersei, Myrcella, and Tommen is not who he was either before.
Okay, now I have some items on the wedding reception, not to the last 2 minutes.
Nothing happened at the wedding reception. We're done.
What?
You're good.
My question my next question is, Cersei sends the food to the kennels. Do you have a theory as to why she does that? Is it just to say fuck Marjorie, or is there some deeper reason? Tyler?
It is clearly just to say fuck you, Marjorie.
And Nick
Consensus reached. Yeah, anything that she did, absolutely, total humanitarian, wonderful thing to do. And,
bullshit.
Marjorie was doing it because she knows that the king is not in power. The people who put the king in power, there are always more of the people than there are the king. So she's absolutely doing it, absolutely trying to do it to curry favor with the masses. But doing so also helps them. She's well aware of that. Yeah, as far as to your original question, regardless of what you're going to try and backtalk to what I just said. Yeah, the only reason Cersei says anything is because she doesn't want Marjorie to be seen as anyone helpful, and also to get away with doing anything positive.
Oh. Nick, I put those as two very separate pages as to whether or not Marjorie is a humanitarian or whether or not she's currying favor with the people of King's Landing. I do not think she's a humanitarian. I think she's a great politician. She could give two flying fucks about the people of King's Landing, but she wants their power, and she wants to be, she wants hers, as she said earlier, she doesn't want to be a queen, she wants to be the queen. And
Sure.
part of that is I think she wants to be in the history book. She wants to be the queen, the queen that's remembered as like being well loved.
Queen is nothing
That's
without
my
a kingdom.
Anyway, Tyler, did you have a point on that? Nope, back to Nick then.
I went like this, like mind blown. I'm remembering all these things. I really need to write stuff down. My life is too chaotic right now for
No
that.
stuff.
We haven't said jack crap about the Dornish prince who came up
I have an
is
next
in
point.
this whole area. I haven't
I have
even mentioned
one. I
yet. You're
guess
at
I
the
have
end
a
of
point
season,
at the
at
reception.
the end of
the
episode
Dornish.
2. Like the whole point of who Oberyn Martell is at the beginning of this episode 1 too was totally omitted. He's at this wedding too, walking around, and he's making eyes at Loras Tyrell at the wedding reception. So there's all sorts of interaction. This is also like we have so many people that we're familiar with are all in one place. So it's interesting to like have these people interact. Like Brienne comes up and talks to the king. Cersei recognizes her. Jamie's there. Loras is there. Marjorie's there. It's like there's so much going on with these interactions, and that's something that the show does really well, is writing all these different characters. Oberyn was just something that blew my mind too, because he's there, and he's a wild card. I think he actually, like we talked earlier about how like people who are smart are scared of Tywin. Oberyn like flat out threatens him, like the killing of young boys and the queen or whatever. Like it's like that's something that we look down on too, or just like dead stares one-on-one with Tywin. So Oberyn is definitely someone who's dangerous and not to be trifled with either, I think.
I guess we can
What
go
you
to
two find
Tyler,
out.
even though I think I beat him. I had my finger up first.
I wasn't paying attention, so sorry. Yeah, so to just backtrack there a little bit, Oberyn Martell is the second in line of the princes of the Martell family there, of the rulers of Dorne. His brother is Doran Martell,
I believe so.
unable to make the wedding because of gout, I believe, is what he suffers from currently there. And the history of the Dornish people is a very interesting history because they are like one of the last kingdoms to ever bend the knee, if at all, to Aegon to begin with, the original invader of Westeros there. And I think it's like a couple hundred years before they finally submit and become in line with the Westeros there. Nick, is it
I
100?
was just going to chat. Oh, I don't know the timeline. I was just going to chime in and say their house motto for Dorne is unbent, unbowed, unbroken. Like they were never actually conquered by Aegon the Targaryen. So yeah, there's a whole history there that at this point in Game of Thrones, they have since been married into the family, like we just referenced. Elia Martell was married to Prince Rhaegar before Robert's Rebellion and all that jazz. And so yeah, they're part of the Seven Kingdoms. But yeah, they never technically were conquered. They came in willingly, and so yeah.
And Oberyn kind of clearly states to Tyrion there when Tyrion asks him, why is Oberyn really here in the city? And Oberyn says he's basically heard the rumors that the babies of his sister, what was her name again? Sorry, Nick.
Elia, I think it's like Elia.
Ilia Martell was basically the last. The babies were basically, to put it one way, basically just destroyed. They were just savagely slaughtered during the sack of King's Landing, and it is believed that Gregor Clegane raped and split her in half. Then basically, and
Mountain, correct.
Oberyn is here basically to seek revenge. And he clearly states that to Tyrion. And then I just love the interaction with him, Cersei, and Tywin at the wedding there, where Oberyn is basically just throwing back in their faces of like, we respect bastards in Dorne there. We are not people of savages of raping and murdering and all of that stuff. Gary.
I was going to say, like, not only to your point, did he believe that the Mountain raped his sister, but it was on the orders of Tywin. So yeah, and I guess on a rewatch, like even when I was watching, I was like, he's making some real weird conversation, and after you kind of connected with the last episode, you realize it's a pretty harsh dig at Tywin that like you know, I think it comes from like, good thing your daughter is sent to the latter rather than the former, being where, women are raped and children are murdered, is directly at Tywin. That like this is the land that this is the sort of world he supports. Nick?
Can put a pin in this thought after I talk about it, but do we think Tywin is capable of giving the Cleganes an order for that? Oh, absolutely. You know, killing off the Mad King and thus his daughter-in-law, who was married to Prince Rhaegar at the time. After all the horrible things that we've talked about in some of these previous recordings that Tywin had suffered at the hand of the Mad King, does he have intent and reason to do so? Absolutely. But did he? We don't know.
You were talking about you said put a needle in it, and I was threading a needle through my middle finger through the threads. I think some of it is that instead of just killing the Mad King and replacing the Mad King with Robert Baratheon, but keeping the Mad King's family, it was that he needed to usurp any like wife or children of the Mad King to then install his daughter as the the queen of the realm. So it was, he needed to kill all of that, the wife and children, and obviously said he just told the mountain, you need to do this. Do it in whatever way you need to. Like, as long as they're dead at the end of the day, the history books will never speak of this. So just might as well move on. Tyler?
A thought to throw out to kind of everyone here is, I wonder if, so when Robert was alive, he made it very clear that he hated the Targaryens for what he perceived they did to Lyanna Stark.
True.
Obviously too, and I think Steven's touched on this a little bit too before when we talk about the change in families of power there, how the incoming family basically wipes out the previous family so that there's no challengers to their perceived power there. Do you think Tywin's orders kind of came with the mindset though too of like him helping Robert wipe out the Targaryens puts him in better favorable light with Robert there, so he can be a little bit more forceful, like, hey, I have this daughter now you should marry to kind of help join our houses together?
I think Robert Baratheon is many things, but I do not think that he is a child murderer. Wife murderer, that's a gray area. Child murderer is probably above his pay grade, although I guess he did ask to have Daenerys killed at some point. But
Yeah.
I'd like to think that was probably a gray area for him. But anyway, one of you has your finger up.
Alex first.
I was gonna say I don't want to like say that Robert said kill the children too, but I was saying that this is more maybe like Tywin knew Robert hated the Targaryens. Tywin then, to favor Curry with Robert, knew it was time to cleanse the Targaryens there, so he kind of gave the order of, let's wipe out the Targaryens as we're sacking King's Landing. Nick?
I think that the benefit is there for Robert, but yeah, I don't think that's something he would have probably had a hand in. Again, the perceived rumor of the realm is that the Mountain had a hand in the disposal of the previous family. I don't think anyone necessarily believes Robert gave the order or was aware of it, but I mean, he hated Rhaegar. He was the one who killed Rhaegar at the Battle of the Ruby Ford Trident. I think that it's just that, hey, I got to get rid of all these Targaryens. Oh, by the way, this family's dead as well. I helped with that. Oh, thank you. I look favorably upon you. And I think that that's what you're trying to get at, Tyler, is that would have given Tywin an edge to maybe supplant his daughter into the relationship.
It also gives Robert Baratheon plausible deniability to wash his hands of the dirty act. because it's not him, it's not on his order. It was on Tywin's order to, have a lord of his, a bannerman of his house, carry out the deed. So I think it gives him plausible deniability. Any other thoughts on the Prince Oberyn?
Seems like someone not to mess with.
I made another note here at the royal reception that Varys seems to hate his spot. There's one point where the camera kind of pans past him, and you can just see that he's like kind of scrunched between some other people. And then when the play of the War of the Five Kings happens, like Varys gets hit in the head with like a toy warhammer, so he just looks pissed the entire time.
Does? I didn't remember that part. That whole scene is very rough to watch.
I can't remember where it was, but at one point I think it jumps to some of the tables that aren't the head table, and you see Pius, the Maester, and then you like kind of go like 2 seats down and you see Varys, because obviously they have a seat close, but they don't have any wives or kingdoms. They're not lords, so they have a close seat, but they're just kind of at the miscellaneous table. Anyway, the next note I had is the War of the Five Kings, which on a rewatch, I tried to kind of pay attention to how their mockumentary garb. Robb Stark is a little more noticeable. He has a little more screen time because he's on a horse. He's got a direwolf helmet, and then obviously the direwolf helmet gets knocked off.
His head is what it's meant to imbue.
Anyway, Balon Greyjoy is bald, and he's riding a ship.
Kraken.
Stannis is riding the Red Woman.
I don't know if I caught that.
Renly, you can see his butt, and he's riding a blonde woman and/or man. It's just
meant to be Brienne.
I think it's more meant to be a man there, because they call him like one of the world's famous. No, that's Loras. They call him Loras Tyrell, one of the more well-known pillow riders.
Yeah.
Anyway, like I was trying to watch it, and it's real tough to because they're all moving. But yes, I think Renly is the one who's like got a blonde, and then I noticed Stannis. There's a lady with red hair, and Joffrey obviously is all goldy and very nicely garbed.
The lion with the stag horns.
I didn't even catch that. I was trying to pay attention to, because obviously he's supposed to look, that caricature is supposed to look very honorable, but all the rest are supposed to look like mockumentaries of these other people.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
The next note I made was that Sansa hands Tyrion the goblet when it gets kicked under the table, and I just noticed perhaps Sansa more than anyone understands the pain of being humiliated by Joffrey. Also, they've obviously been, kind of linked together of like they're both just trying to survive Joffrey and get the hell out of King's Landing. Tyler?
And that's definitely it's painfully awkward, not just from the viewer's perspective, but even everybody in attendance there. You could tell it's just a tense, awkward scene too going on there with the king berating his uncle.
And I think it's supposed to feed back to the cloaking, because the cloaking was very much a similar situation where Joffrey stole the stool that Tyrion was going to use, and they just sort of had to. Sansa just sort of have to play the fool, because in order to belittle Tyrion in a way, Joffrey has to even further belittle Sansa. So, that is all of the items I have up to the last, let's say, 2 minutes. However, I did notice that in the the pie, when it's cut, there's a dead pigeon, perhaps poisoned. Or perhaps hit with a sword. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nick?
On that note, good observation with the dead pigeon. Seems something kind of foreboding there. But I noticed too, our rewatch, Joffrey drinks his drink from the cupbearer a couple times. After Sansa and Tyrion give it back to him, and he goes down. They're like, "Oh, the cake is here, the pie is here, whatever." And because there's this weird stare where Joffrey's trying to get Tyrion to kneel before him, and he doesn't. And then finally, he just takes the cup from him and he sets it down to his right on the table where the Tyrell family, as the now married-in family, are sitting next to him.
Nope, it's still on his table.
It's on Joffrey's table, but it's on
his right, near
it's on his left, actually. Like if Joffrey was looking at the table and everyone was sitting behind the table, it would be his left then.
Or if he's
him
looking at the
seated
table
to his right, yes.
to his right. So I was just saying it's on that side, and then he walks down to the pie. So there's a moment where he's separated from it, because now, as I'm sure we're about to dive into, something happens with his cup. But there's a big pause there where everyone's focus is on Joffrey, 20-some paces away from his cup.
I think we're all trying to be foreboding. Joffrey dies. We're assuming it's poison, and we there's a lot of spoilers as to when or what. And Tyler's shaking his fist because he's excited.
Long
been waiting
live
for
King
3 hours.
Joffrey, long may he reign. Oops.
I've been waiting 3 hours to drink in his honor. May that bastard rot.
Anyway,
So first of all,
so this becomes an ongoing thread, and obviously it ends with Tyrion being accused.
I think we should definitely give props to the actor. His name's, is it Jackie Gleason, Nick?
Jack Gleason.
Jackie Gleason was the older guy in
who's now a theological theology professor.
Yeah, like after this show,
after he died, he gave up acting to like go become a professor of theology.
Really?
Yeah,
I have not heard that.
Big props to the actor here, basically, because he made such a he basically portrayed such a character that you just absolutely wanted to hate every week he was on screen there.
Is the worst. Your boy Joffrey.
Yes.
Your boy Joffrey.
Your boy Joffrey is no more.
I still have the hero of the revolution.
I have to say, I remember when this scene first aired, I was just in disbelief, because so often in this show you see people get away with things, especially Joffrey, where you're just like, this is so horrible, this is the worst thing that can come from it. And I know I've been the first to quip, if you think this has a happy ending, then you haven't been paying attention. It's so out of the blue, because it's not something you expect. Like we were just talking about at this play he was watching. He's laughing and he's joking and he's telling his uncle that he's worthless and trying to make him kneel before him. And he just got married, right? He's the most powerful person in the world. This death comes completely out of the blue. And I think for a lot of audiences, not just myself, when I first saw this scene, you're just kind of like, what the heck just happened? And you're just like left dumbfounded after this, like these last 2 minutes.
Any other thoughts without trying to avoid spoilers? Obviously, no surprise to anyone. Shit gets interesting.
The music the episode ends with is just really great too. It's the Rains of Castamere, sung by the people who were singing it at the wedding there, but it's more of the long version that you get to hear it there, and it's kind of I wouldn't say somber one. It's definitely like a weird melodramatic take on it there. Nick?
As Joffrey's passing, he's choking is the main premise from this poison, whatever he's got, something. He's like bleeding from the nose, he's gasping, he's clawing at his face. Doesn't he point as he's dying too? Because we see him dead. Like the end of the show is we see him stop breathing. So before he dies, doesn't he like point to somebody too?
Yeah, he tries to reference pointing towards Tyrion there, saying Tyrion is the one who did it. What are you timing out, Gary? Here, we're not spoiling anything.
I don't want to jump into spoilers. He thinks,
That's what happened.
clearly
Yeah, he
points at
seemingly
Tyrion
so
there,
points,
saying-
and everybody like looks at him, and Tyrion even like picks up the cup like in dismay, wondering what the heck he may have done or what happens. That's not.
and then
spoiling anything.
Cersei yells,
Take him.
he killed him, take him, or something like that. Yeah. There's no spoiler there, Gary.
I don't know. I think there's spoiler things in that scene, but we can talk about it after the episode.
It's covered in the episode, so it's not really a spoiler if we're talking about the episode.
Anyway. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Or you want to wrap it up?
Long live Joffrey.
Oh yeah, the world is better off without him. But interesting, like one of you said, things get interesting moving forward. Then.
Yes. Did you have anything, Nick, to kind of touch on from the episode?
No, nothing that we went back and talked about. Then I just remembered some of those bigger key players. So we're good.
Okay. Gary, are you good then?
I'm good.
All right. So we're going to take her into the home stretch here then. So for next time, we'll be watching episode 3 and episode 4. Episode 3 is titled Breaker of Chains. Episode 4 is titled Oathkeeper.
Lisa.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us this fine evening. Thank you for listening, everyone. Hope you have a good one.
Have a
See
good
ya,
day,
folks.
everybody.